Phil, we usually like to have a lot of fun and games and that kind of thing, but we have something of a somber milestone to mark this week, and I don't really know a good way to put it. It's
Okay.
going to make various people very sad, and it's really the end of an era. I think I'd ask you to do the honors of breaking this unpleasant news.
I hate to do this. Yeah. I was wondering how we were gonna tell this news, but I guess we're just gonna come out and say it. You
No better
just
way.
rip the band-aid off, all that.
Yep.
Yes. Steve Clark is no longer a member of the Houston Dynamo. His contract option was not renewed, but Andrew Tarbell's was. So I guess they're gonna go with Tarbs in the foreseeable future here as their goalkeeper.
The incalculable change that this is going to be, where the Austin fan base having former Austin player Tarbell to taunt only when he would end up playing as the backup keeper. Now they have to shift all of the bullying, all of the sign making, all of that from Steve Clark to Andrew Tarbell. And my heart goes out to all the people who've been storing up loads of great Steve Clark jokes for 2025 because
Yeah, the haircut treasure trove in itself.
does he land at another Western Conference club and Austin fans still have a reason to use those? I don't know.
So,
Could be he goes to another league entirely. I don't know. I just don't know how people are going to face this.
mhm. Yeah, the Supercuts endorsement, maybe. I don't know. What does the future bring, really? You were donning the gloves in the Media Cup game, so I was wondering,
Oh,
did you take your inspiration from Steve Clark or from Andrew Tarbell, or was there another vaunted Western Conference goalkeeper who you decided to take your inspiration from, and not doing terribly bad compared to what happened in the first half to your losing team?
wow.
Although I did not contribute at all, really, except for a lot of running around.
This Verde FC slander on
Mhm.
Listos United, isn't it enough that you guys won 10-7? Isn't it enough? No, I think part of my problem was that I took too good of inspiration from Brad Stuver and I really went for various saves, but I stretched and warmed up as a field player, not a goalkeeper. And here's why that's a problem, because your body
Okay.
stretches and moves in totally different ways. When you're
Mhm.
diving to get full extension, as I did, injuring myself, injuring my diaphragm, getting my diaphragm caught between the rest of my innards and my ribs and the ball for a save that no less than the great Bob Ballou playing on the opposing team told me that was a hell of a
Mhm.
save,
Mhm.
man. You know what? Was it worth getting injured? No. Do I still appreciate the compliment? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I was in pain. Like my calves were screaming. Yeah, I did the mental thing of shifting to goalkeeping mindset, going back to when I think I was 11 the last time I played goalkeeper, and I'm
Okay.
just this side of 40. So it's been a while. I was mentally prepared, but I did not physically prepare myself. So
Mhm.
I went in with the Brad Stuver mindset and the body work of Steve Clark, I think is what ended up happening. And that's huh, not a fake
And you're
cough.
still in
That's been
it.
happening.
You were
Oh, I'm
still
still
feeling
feeling
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still feeling it
Yeah.
almost a week later. But I feel like if I had gone into the game as goalkeeper, I feel like we would have kept out some of those pesky goals and we would have triumphed. There's one game a year.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's an amazing event every year. You gear yourself up, you're sore for a couple of days or longer. Yeah, I just have to put one question to you. And this comes from somebody at my advanced age with this perspective. You had mentioned stretching. What is it like to actually stretch?
It's wow. Wow, Phil. Okay. I think we have the
Because
answer. I think we know why you're not the leading goal scorer of the Media Cup. You got to stretch, man. You got to stretch.
I try and it just doesn't work as it used to.
Emergency podcast. Better did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. There are quite a few, and then we've got some mailbag questions. So we have some emergencies, some perceived emergencies from some of you out there in the audience. Moisés, how are you doing today, other than the aforementioned soreness, the Media Cup induced soreness?
Good. I'm on the mend, and yeah, we've got a boatload of minor emergencies and the massive emergency that is a mailbag that is stuffed like a turkey, which is appropriate for this Thanksgiving Eve recording. We'll talk a little bit about the Media Cup. We've got some MLS coaching moves. We've got some MLS playoff stuff to talk about, all, relatively interesting and relevant to the Austin fan base, even though Austin is not in those playoffs. We got some Austin rumors that you've covered on the Substack that I'd like an additional layer of critique that will be as big of a surprise to you as it will to the audience. Then we'll wrap things up by taking care of the mailbag questions. But first, Phil, as we were talking,
and a little surprise at the end.
So on the Media Cup, some people know what this is, but each year the good people in the Austin FC comms department arrange for members of the media who are attending games as working press, along with media partners, some members of their staff. But they put this together as a thank you. It's a thing that I played in last year, not because I was invited up front, but because I found out that it was happening. And I was like, hey, can I show up? I know that other people have been doing this longer and in meatier ways than I have. And it was a great soreness inducing experience then. It is a privilege. It is an honor. And to me, Phil, one of my favorite things about this year's Media Cup is that Hernan and Alex from We Are Austin TV were included, and We Are Austin made history.
Oh, yes. They tell us what that history was.
So there is now someone who has scored 5 goals in Q2 in one game, and that man is Hernan Gonzalez, who took home the MVP trophy, which was a custom Yeti. And what is looking forward to this each year like for you, Phil?
It's so much fun to be able to play at Q2 and to be able to do this with people who cover the team all year. Obviously, it's free tacos. There was a Kirkland cold brew this year, which I did not partake of, but Eric Goodman braved one. So there are mimosas for those who want to partake. I typically do not want to partake of alcohol at 11 in the morning, unless it is weekend Arsenal related, which I haven't even really done in a while. I prefer to watch that curled in a fetal ball on my couch, as is the custom with watching a team that is probably not going to win the Premier League again this year, but is going to come awful close.
That table looks real weird.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting things in that table. Yeah. Another Media Cup in the books. We saw some new faces, more folks that, either actively or have actively covered things. Brittany Flowers, formerly of local TV, who plays in an indoor league here locally, was the assist MVP. And without her, I don't think Hernan would have gotten all 5 of those. But Hernan really puts the cinco in cinco uno those.
Yeah. And then you heard about this on Moon Tower, but Laura Gaia won the Resilience Award for taking a ball to the face and was remarkably unfazed and bounced back pretty right away, which was good to see, clearly. Yeah, I did not hurt myself like I did last year, so that was good. I just had the usual requisite post-game soreness last year. I jammed my knee and decided to continue playing on, and that was a real bad mistake. So I probably should not have done that. So this year I fared far better in that department, even though last year I got an assist. This year, as I mentioned, I just ran around a lot, had some decent passes, and sometimes the ball baffled me in front of goal. Again, Josh Wolf had touted my abilities as a striker all last season. If he saw footage of this match, he would have been deeply disappointed. Though I did get the opportunity at one point to kick away a ball as it was being set up for a penalty kick, and did not receive a card because there were a lot of antics going on at that portion of the game, and the referee was focused on Jimmy Boss from KUT of Vamos Verde fame.
Yeah, I got to be honest. Every time you headed toward me, I was like, I cannot let Phil score on me. Like, there are many things I cannot do. I don't know if I can help us dig out of the hole that we got dug into in the first half, but I cannot let Phil score on me. I'll never hear the end of it. It'll be.
I had a goal celebration ready. The whole take a picture of the goalkeeper.
Wow.
Like I had that in my back pocket. I was ready.
Hang on to that film. You'll never use it. Okay, Phil, we got some MLS coaching moves. Some people let go. Some people brought in
moves. Tell me, lay it on me.
So we'll start. So here are the names that you would not believe that were brought in to coach His new coach is Olaf Melber. Didn't have that anywhere on any bingo card, but I guess makes
No.
sense.
Yep.
And Inter Miami hired Messi former Barca teammate Javier Mascherano.
Tata Martino exits weirdly.
Yeah, and you know, them not making the playoffs, I could see
Well, they made the
that.
playoffs,
Well,
but
not making it through the playoffs to the final, which
sure, right.
very much that's what the league, that's what the organization wanted. I could
Sure.
see them hanging it being on Tata's fault, but I don't know.
It's MLS. MLS is weird. It was a 3-game series. Atlanta had their number this year,
Yeah.
and those things happen. I don't know that you can really pin that on one particular person. It's just when you run into a really hot Brad Guzan, it's hard to overcome that.
And
you could push him into a net post goal, and you can taunt him, and you can do all
you can
these
do
things,
so
and
many
he
things. All you
comes
had
right
to do
back.
was play for Barcelona at one point. You can do so many things to Guzan and get away with it. A dismissal that also happened since last we recorded. Cushing out at NYCFC took a lot of people by
which is
surprise.
weird.
Also,
Yeah. And I again, there were questions about whether he would last through the first part of the season, whether he would even start the season. And he did, I would say, a better job than maybe anybody had expected with that team. And again, it's always weird. They tend to bring players in and out. They had some moves that didn't work, but those are more, I think, front office things than any kind of like Cushing chemistry type things. But to go the whole season with him and then to suddenly dump him at this point, just because they got done by the Red Bulls, I understand the magnitude of that loss and what it is. They did, I think, maybe what most everybody would have expected. Yeah, maybe they do get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they didn't seem to be like quite the team that was going to get to MLS Cup, given Miami, given Cincinnati, given Columbus. Of course, those teams were all out of it by the time that NYCFC had a clear path, but Orlando's still the 4th seed, right? Again, it falls to them. It's a little unusual that the Red Bulls are at this point in the playoffs rather than NYCFC, but I'm not entirely surprised. And I think that is a little bit weird, again, especially for a coach, that if they were going to let him go, I thought it was going to be way, way earlier, not just at the end of the season here.
and the big one I would say for this Vanni Sartini
Yeah.
cast is the Whitecaps parted ways with a really
which is
solid
weird.
coach.
We also didn't talk about Jim Curtin. I think
I think we might have mentioned it, but we didn't really address it. But I think talking about
'Cause
Jim
that's big
Curtin
too.
and like Jim is big, because of the length of tenure he had at
Mhm.
Philly, in addition to, how he was rated and seen. But there's a similar level of those two guys when it comes to Sartini and Curtin.
I think was Sartini really had Vancouver excelling for the amount of talent that they had. They're still a couple of pieces away from doing really. They pushed LAFC to the limit. Again, it's, that's their nemesis. I mean, they do tend to lose a lot to LAFC in playoff situations. That's just the matchup they got. If you fault him for anything, maybe it's just a little bit of a slide down the stretch. If they had been in a more advantageous position, if they were in like kind of Seattle spot, maybe they would be in the conference finals right now. But that they had to go through LAFC right away in the first round was particularly difficult. But again, it was a 3-game series, and they just fell a little bit short in that third game. They looked fantastic in that second game. And yeah, again, is Vanni possibly going to go to the Union, which I think would be fascinating? Was it going to be like a Freaky Friday thing? Will Jim Curtin end up in Vancouver? Would he take that job? I don't know. It's all of a sudden NYCFC is open, and that's an intriguing player.
And
either of those two, although they tend to go like very much within CFG. So I would be really surprised if they dip outside their comfort zone for that. But again, there are 2 really good coaches available, and there are at least 3 intriguing jobs that are still out there. So yeah, I'm fascinated to see where it's going to shake out.
Let's pose what if LAFC lets go of Cherundolo?
Would be interesting, but I don't know that it seems like that would have happened by now.
Yeah.
Because we're a little bit away from LAFC getting bounced. And LAFC getting bounced was not terribly surprising against Seattle. It was, but Seattle's still a really good, capable defensive team. And the win was a little fluky in that an own goal figured pretty prominently into that. And those kind of things, again, I was going to say those kind of things can't be helped, but it was pretty bad.
It looked
was
like
a pretty
it could have been
egregious
helped.
own goal. Yeah.
I guess looking at the available pieces, presuming that Atlanta hires and doesn't just hang on to this guy who did something with what he had to work with. Where do we think these guys land? I think Curtin and Sartini definitely stay within MLS. They
Yeah.
are very desirable MLS style coaches who know the league, know the territory. Does one of them
Although
go to
Vanny did have a
Minnesota?
quote about no, Minnesota, like they're gonna stick with Ramsey, I think. Like
Okay.
I don't think that's I think he got them overperforming again, especially given Reynoso and that whole situation. I think Minnesota's fine. I think Minnesota's
Yeah.
happy with what they're doing. I don't know that there's gonna be any more kind of coach expulsion type things. The only thing I would think of, is if Atlanta does officially open up. And again, I wonder Floggerway would be interested in Vanny. That would be an interesting place for him to go. Although he did talk about like how happy he was to be in Canada through the end of the year with his work permit, because he talked about not necessarily wanting to go to Trumpland. And unless Toronto opens up or Montreal opens up, then if he's coaching in MLS, he is going to have to live in the US and be here with all of us experiencing what we'll be experiencing. That could be really interesting. Some spicy quotes maybe to come. Yeah. And again, I kind of wonder in this, does Josh Wolf's phone start ringing again at some point as well with some
Yeah.
extra coaching vacancies that come up? Again, I expected by now that maybe he might either be an assistant with the US or an assistant under Berhalter, but don't know that that's necessarily the path he wants to take. But apparently he is still at U18 games, sitting uncomfortably apart from Claudio Reyna, who is also attending those U18 games as they watch their sons play in the same awkward academy situation that they find themselves in.
Yeah. Maybe Vanny goes to Serie A. You know,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I could see that.
Juventus could use a new coach, I think.
It's interesting.
I don't know that their ownership is terribly happy with how they're doing this year. Yeah, like looking at Vanny as somebody who may not want to stay in MLS. I think him going to a club that is willing to be spendy, which Vancouver's front office never was. He did the best with what he had to work with. You know, if he has his choice and isn't, going with just what he has offered, I'm sure that there are other MLS clubs that would entertain bringing him in, but there very much is that question of does he actually want to stay within that league?
Right. I just had an interesting thought. You were mentioning if Cherundolo does get cut loose from
Mm-hmm.
LAFC,
Mm-hmm.
what if LAFC brings in Curtin?
That's exactly why I brought it up, because
Okay.
that would be hilarious
It
in
really would.
so many different ways.
Okay,
And
you want to win a championship finally? Couldn't do it with the Union? There you go.
yeah, and
A team you can do that with.
Bradley Carnell hasn't landed anywhere, right?
No, I don't think
I don't
so.
see an LAFC picking him up.
No, I
Um,
don't. I don't either.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see where the musical chair dance of MLS coaches
Mhm.
goes. You want to talk some playoffs?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah, next
So
emergency playoffs.
the next emergency is the MLS playoffs, which have completely unintentionally been wildly entertaining, not in ways that we gather Don Garber would be happy about,
Right.
where we have conference finals, Orlando versus New York Red Bulls and LA Galaxy versus Seattle, as totally predicted. Everybody knew this was happening. The El Trafico didn't happen. You wrote a great
Right.
piece, and then there were 4 for the Substack, which
Yep.
everybody should take a look at and read. Let me ask you, Phil, what
Mhm.
final do you want? Because that's something that wasn't in that piece. But
Yeah.
based on these options, what do you want MLS Cup to be this year?
The Galaxy have been so much fun that I would like to see them in it, despite my boyhood club attachments. Certainly, Seattle in the final, that would be fun in its own way. But the Galaxy have been so high flying and they've been so great in the playoffs that I do want to see that continue. And then I think Orlando has the best chance out of the East teams to make that an interesting game. But there would certainly be something historic about an LA versus New York MLS Cup final. So that could be pretty entertaining. Again, I don't know that the Red Bulls necessarily have the sauce to get into MLS Cup. I don't know that they'll beat Orlando, but at the same time, that could be fun in its own way. I guess I would lean towards Galaxy Orlando because that still gives us the best chance with the most talent on the field. But again, I'm wired in a way to love whatever MLS will produce other than weird Open Cup schedules. So I'm ready for anything. Do you have a particular preference in this?
My dislike of watching Red Bulls play is I just don't love their style of play. Also, I
Mhm.
dislike various
Sure.
of their players who are jerks.
Okay.
Trying to set that aside,
Mhm.
I think it would be interesting for the least wanted by the MLS front office pairing, which would be Red Bulls versus Seattle, because Galaxy at least has the MLS 1.0 heritage and has the superstar vibe that they play up in marketing. You see them promoting LA Galaxy and LAFC, and like there's a specific clique of clubs that, regardless of how they're performing, the league always goes out of their way to highlight, almost like these are the X-Men you really read this comic book for. Who needs Maggot? You want to see Gambit. So we're going to give you the Gambit. So yeah, there's a part of me that's like, a Red Bull Seattle one would disappoint all the right people. If I'm looking at the odds, I really think I feel like it's going to be Orlando Galaxy, but I'm very much like coin flipping between Galaxy and Seattle. That's the way that it feels to me. And I think Miami's in-state rival, Orlando, making it to MLS Cup is something that will just further ignite that rivalry, which is already pretty powerful out among those Florida men. But Orlando making it to MLS Cup and Miami not making it to a conference final,
semifinal.
Yeah, not even a semifinal. Like that's the kind of fuel that makes rivalries more interesting year over year when you look at the story of club v club, with many clubs having a very short history compared to most of the rest of the world.
It's also objectively hilarious for the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one other question for you on MLS playoffs. Do you think the results thus far are going to force a rethink in 2025? Are they already looking at revamping the format because the lotto balls didn't come out the way that maybe certain people wanted them to?
Yeah, that's really hard to say. I don't think they're going to go with Jordi Alba's plan, which is basically just put Miami into a one-game final against another team. I think they're going to still want to have playoffs. But again, the best of three, on one hand, yes, like it did create some unpredictable results, but theoretically, like a one-game first-round series would have the potential to create more unpredictable kind of matchups in the next round than a 3-game series, where theoretically over the course of 3 games, you have to beat a team twice in order to advance. And so that should be advantageous to teams like Miami and Columbus and LAFC, who have these kind of talent gaps with a lot of the other teams that they're going to be facing. But the thing is that I'm real concerned about playoff wise is just that it's too long. There's another international break that gets in the way. Momentum is kind of blunted. If you're going to do it, you probably want to do it in between the October-November international breaks and get it to fit within that window. That's what I would do if I was the commissioner. Because the other thing that's going to happen too is that you're going to have both these conference final games now butting up against Texas A&M and some other rivalry games, the college football. And then it looks like, I think MLS Cup is going to go straight up against SEC championship. Again, if you are in Austin, you're probably way more wired towards the Texas college football games, even if you like soccer, even if you love soccer, just because this is a chance for Texas to do something historic. It's not going to happen like this every year, but you're also dealing with other college football championships, and to try to compete that weekend is foolhardy. It seems like it would have made more sense for MLS if they were going to try to counter program against college football, and the playoffs are going this long already and momentum's weird. Why not just push MLS Cup to the 14th, where you're dealing with Army, Navy, and the Heisman Trophy ceremony, and that's like your real only competition, right? So versus all the championships deciding all the playoff spots, and you're throwing MLS Cup in a Saturday afternoon in the middle of that. It's not wise. It's not prudent. And again, if they go to this fall to spring schedule, then, you'll be having your playoffs in April and May. You'll be up against some NBA stuff, up against the start of baseball season, but you're not going to have this kind of counter programming with King football. So that's, again, it's a little bit of a rant there, but I feel like to try to drag the playoffs over this period of time and then have your most important games going up against college football's most important games, it's not wise for trying to grow the sport.
Let me throw a hypothetical at you. We've been watching the new league stage format of the UEFA Champions League this year, where everybody plays 3 games. It's instead of a series of 3 between the same 2 teams. Every team is guaranteed 3 games, and the points determine who makes it into the knockout stage. Could you see something like that working for MLS, looking at it as similar to what they like doing with Leagues Cup, is having matchups that people don't see all the time, mix up that stage. Not even, I think they're so big on conferences, and now they've added divisions in MLS Next Pro.
Yeah.
It feels like they
Yeah.
would do that within the conferences still, but making it so that each team doesn't play the same team twice. And it's just down to put the points on the board, win the games. Do you think that something like that could actually work for MLS?
I don't know. Again, what that's going to do, there's going to be, and I don't know how Champions League necessarily is doing this, but it's going to create some sort of imbalance with like home and away. And the whole reason that you have this best of 3 series in the first round is that you're guaranteeing 16 teams that go to the playoffs, which is maybe too many teams. You're guaranteeing them home matches, essentially. That's why that happens. So anybody who essentially gets into the playoffs, once you get through the play-in game, you get a home match. You get one more chance to do things in front of your fans, to bring in stadium revenue, those sorts of things, right? So it functions as this reward. And if you had something that's as freeform as what Champions League is doing, which is fun, but also it's a little harder to understand. It's a little harder to get used to. It's harder to get into the rhythm. And I find myself just tangentially watching Champions League right now, and I'm planning to more delve into it deeply once there's a knockout round and it does have a little bit more form. Right now, it feels too amorphous. It doesn't necessarily feel like it is a true Champions League, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see how that keeps progressing. And I mean, to me,
for sure.
there've got to be like seeding ways to make something like what Champions League is doing make sense, where if you make it into the playoffs, you'll get a home game, but
Right.
people above a certain line get 2 home games guaranteed, or the top in each conference get 3 home games. Do something that makes regular season points actually matter. That's the thing that gets me, is that we keep having this conversation of who cares about whether you're 4th or 5th or whatever. Unlike Next Pro, there isn't the pick your opponent thing. I don't know. Maybe have them do pick your opponent.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah.
You know?
No, that would be fun. Yeah. Like I'm all for that, but I will be surprised if they alter the playoffs further, but I think they should scrap the play-in game. I think they should go 8 teams per conference. I think they should just go 1 game in the first round, 1 game in the semis, 1 game in the conference finals, and then have an MLS Cup and have it fit within that first window, that October to November window, and have the season be done and not worry about, again, having to lose the momentum that the international break brings. And then again, trying to bring it back at a point where if you've let people check out and wander over to college football, it's going to be harder to get them to come back, especially at the time that you're doing it. So.
And I'd hate to be cynical. If the way that the format works now is designed to keep as many months of MLS product on the air, despite how exhausting or annoying or inconvenient it is for the players or the technical staffs, I would hate for that to be the reason that this is what we have. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have more off-season time to have the shadow commissioner of MLS, Phil West, weigh in on how to fix the rest of MLS.
Yeah. The other thing that's weird too is that you have, as we're recording this on Wednesday, you have roster decisions coming for everybody except for the 4 teams that are still in the playoffs. That's weird as well. If you have the season end by mid-November, you can have all the teams make their roster decisions at the exact same time. You are going to have free agency happen after MLS Cup, which is good in that respect at least, but you still have this kind of weird, unshaped free agent picture up until MLS Cup, even though you've got most of it figured out. And as we were recording, San Jose still has not announced who they are keeping yet, as I am on unofficial Jeremy Abovasi watch. I'm strangely seeing what Bruce Arena and company will do with somebody who I think could really help Austin at striker, which I think we're going to get to in mailbag questions coming up.
We will. Speaking of roster decisions and that sort of thing, we have some Austin-specific rumors, that one of which we talked a bit about Marvin Duksch last time we recorded. You've got separate pieces up in the Substack about him, about Paulo Diaz, and about Hercules. And
because things are slow.
Things are slow, but people should go read those. Like, if you want more background, get into the nitty-gritty of stats and all that kind of stuff. But as like the director's commentary note on those 3 pieces, Phil, I need you to play a game.
Yeah. Okay.
F, marry, kill.
Oh, okay.
Of these 3 players, Who do you sign to a short contract to see how he works out,
Mhm.
a substantive contract like Usman Bukhari got, and who do you absolutely
Okay.
not think is a fit?
Yeah, this is actually maybe easier than you would expect. And by substantial contract, are we talking like at least a 3 year?
More than a 1 year with an option.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say, and that would be your Mary option, I assume. That would be Dooch for me. Because again, I think that's going to take quite a bit of money to do, but at the same time, I think that he is a DP caliber number 9 striker. I think that's something that the team needs. I think that he's got the numbers that kind of best support that. And I do think that would be something that would be a good solid move for Austin. Again, I think if they had a striker that was a little bit younger, maybe a little bit more unproven, but still had some good numbers, I think there might be smarter choices out there. But in terms of the strikers that we've seen Austin connected with so far, that's the one that I've felt best about so far. I know Borja had some great numbers, and he's going to end up being in the print version of the mailbag. I think that's something that we're going to put up on Thanksgiving as well, in addition to the podcast that you're listening to right now. So we'll keep and help in a mailbag to baste a turkey to. In terms of effing, I would say Hercules, just because I do, as I talked about in the article, don't know where he'll fit in as a midfielder. I see him as maybe more Danny Pereira-like than anybody who Austin actually needs to replace, unless there is, again, we talked about this with Pereira as well, is this kind of the sliding doors phase. If he is indeed going to Europe, does Hercules suddenly become this player who can do Pereira-like work, who is generally of the same age, generally, I think maybe based on what I'm seeing about the same general talent level. Again, South American player, ostensibly, right? Those are, again, and then in terms of
That leaves Paulo
not,
Diaz.
that does leave
He's
Paulo
out in the
Diaz,
cold.
because I don't think that is what the team needs right now.
The team needs a sixth center back.
Fifth now, because Hedges is gone. But yes, but still, yeah, no, it's unless there's a center back on the way out, but still, like, the money, again, if you are spending DP money on a center back, it needs to be like Walker Zimmerman in his prime or something like that. Somebody who's going to make a big difference, and somebody who can also do some things on the offensive end on set pieces, as well as stabilizing an entire defense. And I don't think that Paulo Diaz is the person that does that.
All right. So there you have it.
Okay.
And like I said, all those pieces.
Do you differ at all on any of these, or was this?
No, I'm like, I was going to say, I thought I would have something to add, but our opinions on this completely line up. Because to me,
Okay.
if they're splashing out big money, Marvin Dukes looks like the shape of where you spend big money, and the numbers back it up, and it makes sense. And as thin as the midfield is at the moment, we've got Danny Pereira at home. We don't have to go out and get an Hercules. Prioritizing these 3 guys, I think that makes sense. And it'll be interesting to see how it actually shakes out once the window opens.
Then again, since it is slow and we are covering these, I cover these because these are rumors that Austin's attached to, but I honestly do not expect any of these players will end up with Austin. I could be wrong, but I would prefer that Rodo Burrell finds the next Cucho out there somewhere and puts up Cucho-like numbers, but that, I think that's the dream that maybe we all have. And I don't know that's necessarily coming, although who knows? Who knows? Names you wouldn't believe.
It's mailbag time, and we've got a chunk of mailbag stuff that will be going out on the Substack in newsletter form.
Yep.
But we've also got a batch of questions that we're going to hit here on the podcast, exclusive to the podcast, so that you can consume this in multiple ways. If your hand gets tired holding the phone over your face while laying down after eating a lot of turkey, guess what? You can put the rest of the mailbag in your ears.
Much easier to digest this part of the mailbag while you were walking your dog.
Exactly.
Which is where I often find myself consuming podcasts.
Well, to kick things off, Michael B asks, if you were an MLS GM, Phil, what positions would you spend your DP slots on? So blank slate, how would you spend your DP slots? Either 3 full DPs or 2 full DPs and 4 U22.
Or assuming 3 DPs though, right?
3 DPs.
Yeah. Okay. I would, and this is going to be pretty easy, striker, and then high-level midfielder, preferably a 10, and then a winger. Again, I think it makes the most sense given where MLS's talent is, given how the teams are built, to have your DPs be offensive players, right? So typically you're not going to have a real big difference making center back or DM who is a DP. There aren't a lot of those in the league. Occasionally you can have kind of a hotshot fullback who has DP status, who will really help a team, particularly if it is something like 3-5-2, where you've got that fullback playing in kind of more of a wing back and having more of a dual offense defensive role. But I would go striker 10 winger. What do you think here?
Assuming that I don't have this wrong, I would
Mm-hmm.
blank slate, ideal
Sure.
situations. I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to do the two
Okay.
full DPs for U22s and the bag of
Oh, okay.
money.
Okay.
The bag of money is very
Sure.
attractive, Phil. The
Right.
bag of money. Two full DPs, one at striker, one attacking midfield,
Mm-hmm.
and at least two of the U22s on the wings. Because
Yeah.
one of the things you watch enough MLS, you need people with gas in the tank who are not
Mm-hmm.
already covered in injuries, or hopefully
Right.
you're not sending these U22s right down injury lane or something.
Mm-hmm.
But having that kind of speed on the wings, spending big money on who should be your two attacking players that are really barreling through somebody else's midfield, and a couple other U22s, spread it
Mm-hmm.
around. Maybe one in midfield, one in the back line. Maybe there's a really promising U22 who works at right back or left back. To me, the direction I see the league going is in that honestly being an ideal where you're bringing up homegrowns through your academy, through your next pro team,
Yeah.
and you're able to have the actual spine of your roster operate like that, where you have
Mm-hmm.
those younger players that have worked in the system, that play nice, that do what they're told, as it were, and don't
Mm-hmm.
constantly buck up against the particular system that a given club has. And this
Right.
isn't even getting into what system the club plays or something, but in an objective sense, that's how I would do it, because I feel like that's the direction that will be most beneficial to a club dealing with this being a salary cap league. So yeah, thanks for the free reign for all situations being ideal and not having to deal with
Mm-hmm.
some horrible contracts.
Yeah. The thing about U22s is, yeah, if you have one or two out of your four that hit, then yes, it is like having younger quasi DPs, and it plus the bag of money makes the overall team stronger. The problem is if you miss on all of your U22s, as some teams we know
I don't
have,
miss. I don't miss like those other
then
guys.
yeah. The problem then is that you have essentially underperforming players in some of your most important positions, and you have one less DP. So if you have one of your two full DPs get injured or has a slump of a year, not that we have seen that or experienced that or at any point, or if a DP has problems acclimating to the league, not that we have seen that happen at any point, then all of a sudden you're automatically at a talent gap, right? So whereas if you have at least two functioning DPs and one is slumping out of your three, then you can at least have those players be difference makers and carry the team to a degree. Again, it's tough to a lot of it just depends ultimately on how much you trust your scouting and how well you think that U22s can acclimate. Wolf was, I think, cynical about U22s, especially later in his tenure, but I think that probably had to do with the U22s that he was being provided.
Kevin T asks, not to be a downer, but I'm curious what
Okay.
kind of off season we'd have to have for you to start doubting Roto.
Mm, I would say at this point now, if we have two senior roster spots still open because we're waiting until the summer to fill them, and we're trying to go thin again like we did last year. We saw that did not work. We saw that put the club at a disadvantage. Certainly, if they had hung on from that NYCFC game and had really turned things around later in the season, I think they would have made the playoffs, and anything could have happened. But we have also seen this team do a late season collapse. Under Estevez, it might be different, but I don't want to necessarily go into another season where we're gonna just lurch along for the first 2/3 of it, get some summer signings, and then all of a sudden we're golden, because we were not last year. And I'm concerned that having that same kind of approach in 2025 will also be rough. And again, with Esteves being here for his first year and to not give him the kind of players that he will need to embark on this turnaround, because it is indeed a need for a turnaround, then I think it's going to be problematic right out of the gate. It's not going to do him a good service. And yeah, I would be disappointed. What about you? Where are you at?
Same general area. Is that's what would worry me, is if the team goes into 2025 thin, that's a hell of a gamble. And one of the things that I put in an answer to the newsletter questions touches on this too, where I completely am sticking by the fact that it does not make good strategic sense to get rid of Zardes with a buyout before the season begins, because you're going to be paying
Sure.
that salary no matter what. I would be shocked if they used the buyout on Zardes before the season starts, because then you've got one guy who has been playing striker, who's been on the team. That isn't to say that I don't see them potentially using it during the season, but this is one of the ways that I could see them filling the roster spots,
Yeah.
knowing that they're going to almost certainly buy out Giassi Zardes in the summer to clear
Right.
not just the salary, but that roster spot for somebody to bring in the summer.
Unless you are buying Zardes out in order to bring in a Bobasi, who is 4
Yes.
years younger than Zardes, about the same salary, has more of a potential to bounce back, and then you still get a prime age DP striker to compete with him. All of a sudden, you've got a Bobasi functioning as a sub, and then he can also play wing. I mean, he's better at center forward, but he's played wing throughout his career as well. And all of a sudden, you're much stronger, with Rubio as your third choice striker. So that's a scenario where, if he is available, which we still don't know.
Come on, we're just going to keep saying his name until he becomes available. The other hypothetical I'd attach to this is, here's the thing that I like about Nico Esteves is the flexibility in tactics. Sometimes at Dallas, he had to be flexible in his tactics because he was handed a Peter Musa that completely upended the way that he had been playing his guys. I think them being thicker than thin at striker is not necessarily a bad thing. So having a prime age striker and subbing Ibobasi and Rubio in as dual nines when that guy needs to come off is the kind of thing that, I'm trying to not get excited, Phil, but I'm starting to believe in possibility.
To borrow from Dora, I like that too.
Up next, Stonehens, the one and only North End Pirate, asks, given the team's financial restraints, who is one player from MLS and one from an international league that you believe will be the best additions to the Austin roster, and why?
This is a good
one
question.
Player from MLS, one player outside of MLS that would be the best addition to the roster. Do we want to be realistic, or do we want to go, obviously, Lautaro Martinez?
Yeah. Internationally, I think it would be somebody that Roto would find somewhere, maybe in the CFG system or somewhere else in Europe. I feel like he'll have a beat on it. Yeah, certainly
The
there are
next
tempting
Erling
international
Haaland.
names out there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know that some people were putting, what about Ricardo Pepi? What would it take to get him? It's being a top 5 league European club would be what it takes.
Being a place where he'd want to go.
Yeah, he's crushing it at PSV. He's going to leave there for the Premier League or La Liga. He's not going to come back to MLS at this phase of his career. So I don't think that something like that is realistic. I think MLS wise, again, we talked about Ibobasi. We don't even know if he's going to be
agreed.
available,
It's Ibobasi.
Yeah, but one name that also came free, which is intriguing to me, is Dylan Barrero, who the Revs just cut loose.
Yeah.
Like, he was doing really fantastic before a knee injury kind of sidelined him, and I don't know if part of that was just challenges coming back, plus the Revs being a total dumpster fire under Caleb Porter this year. But I'm wondering, with the change of scenery in the system, would somebody like that all of a sudden be the kind of top level winger that could pair with Bukari, and then you have O'Brien as wing depth, you have Gallagher still being able to be wing depth, and you have a much stronger team in that way. I still want to see the rest of where free agency shakes out, because I do think that in re-entry draft is going to be the places where those players are going to be available. I don't know that there's necessarily a trade in the works, but that's a name that's just intriguing to me. Again, it's pretty high risk, but I think also fairly high reward if you bring him in and he does work and he does come back to the level where he was.
Yeah, I'm sticking to the Bobacy.
I mean,
Bobacy from within the league and the next Erling Haaland. That it doesn't have to be part of a football dynasty like Holland is,
sure. Mhm.
but somebody who has that, oh wow, that somebody is missing in Europe. I think that, or Africa. Like I think there's some really stellar players from AFCON that
Mhm.
are slept on because there isn't the kind of depth of scouting within MLS for
Mhm.
that federation in particular. Let's see. Up next, Phil, we're going to talk about a really important thing, and that's bullying.
Okay.
Seth wants to know, does it qualify as bullying if we taunt Ricky Pooge for tucking his jersey inside his shorts? Is it or is it not? It is not. Okay.
It is
I
not.
agree. I agree with the ruling. Judge Phil
Boom, done.
West, done. Michael W. asks, who will make the biggest jump or who will fall off the hardest from 2024 to 2025?
From Austin, I assume.
Oh,
Let's say for Austin for
yeah, we'll say for Austin for the sake of specificity.
okay. So
And maybe we also just talk about like league wide teams or
okay.
something.
Sure,
Just
we can do that.
yeah,
Okay.
flavor.
So player wise for Austin, so what are the phrasings again? Just to be
Who will
clear.
fall off the hardest or make the biggest jump?
Make the biggest jump. I'm gonna say Owen. I'm going to say unshackled from his dad being coach, getting new input. You already saw the big leap that he was making, looking stronger, looking bigger, getting facial hair from the start of last season to the end of last season. I feel like there's good things happening for him, and I think that's going to continue. I really think that he's going to have. But again, he's at the age where he can make a noticeable leap, I think. So I think I would say him. And then biggest fall off is I hate to yeah, this is a really
Relative
rough one.
2024, 2025, like
Yeah,
year over
yeah.
year.
I don't know if it's picking on him further to say Zardes, but I think if Zardes continues, I don't like the level of regression, and also just Diego having the contract that he has. I think that he's a little bit more incentivized to perform just because he is playing for that. Zardes may subconsciously know that he's not going to necessarily get extended, and I'm really worried about just his ability to continue, especially in this new system, as Estevez imparts what he wants to do. I don't know that he's necessarily going to flourish in that, because I think like Driussi is going to have a little bit of a bounce back. I don't think he's going to be quite to 2022 levels, but I feel like he was just in a funk, and I think he also realizes that if he's looking to make one more big move or sign more and more big contract, he's going to have to show that and earn that. So I think that's going to be motivating for him. And then I also think Bukari's going to make a leap just because I think he's going to understand the league better. And I think we're going to see him. I hope we see him get to his potential, what we have expected from him, and saw in some flashes, but didn't see consistently in the games that he was in here. What do you think here?
You picked Owen for the biggest jump. I'm gonna go with Driussi, drafting
Okay.
off of some of what you were just saying about him. He's got to have a really good year because he needs
Mhm.
to earn that second spot alongside what I consider the number one locked in. Definitely Brad Stuber is going to be in the All-Star game, but Driussi,
Mhm.
for his valuation as a player, for his career
Yeah, exactly.
trajectory, he needs to
Yeah.
earn that other spot in the All-Star game. He needs to compete on the big stage in ways that we both know that he's capable of. And
Yeah.
I think that for similar reasons that you said about Owen, I think that he is going to be coming in feeling a bit unfettered, a bit fresh, and hopefully whatever funk there was to dust off. I feel like he's going to do it because he's got to do it, and I know that
Mhm.
he's capable of doing it. In terms of drop off, I mean, I'm reluctant to the reason I'm reluctant to answer this question is, I want to think the best of everybody, man. I just want everybody to have fun
Yeah, me too.
and have
Yeah,
a
yeah,
great
yeah. No,
time.
yeah, I understand this.
I
Yeah.
I am concerned about Leo Väisänen's injury history, his inability to get back in form, which to be clear, I'm not
Mhm.
blaming on the guy. Human bodies are human
Right.
bodies, and if only we were all cyborgs, but he's the one that I am concerned about going into 2025, even though he didn't have a great 2024, the part of it that he did play,
Mhm.
because that plantar fascia injury itself is just, that's a mess to recover from.
Yeah.
And when you have a dispiriting season like 2024 in those Scandinavian countries, they only get so much sunlight a year, Phil. Is not sad on top of being injured, but nothing would make me happier than to be wrong about that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think it's really down to, that's a tough thing to come back from, which I'm not even, it's not even a skill issue thing. It's not really being critical of him. It's a thing that's outside of his control. But I think it's going to be tough. And the club is in a weird position in terms of
Mhm.
how much they have committed to him in terms of contract years.
Right.
And it's keep healing him up. And if they stay
Yeah.
as full in the back line as they are, they can keep
Mhm.
waiting and either deal
Yeah.
him once he's healthy and is shown to be healthy,
Mhm.
or keep on keeping on with him.
Yeah, I think that's part of why he shut it down, is just to be able to recover. I think
Yeah.
maybe to move. I would be, let's put it this way. I would not be surprised if Väisänen was not part of the club opening day.
Yeah, me either.
I think that he might move on before that.
Yeah,
So,
I think that might make the most sense. And if he is requested a trade to go back
mhm.
to Europe, go back home, as it were, I think that lines up with the uncharacteristically open and
Right.
generous Josh Wolf telling us that the player took himself out of selection. I think that's it.
Yeah. Would Roto want to pay two players what he is currently playing Väisänen right now? Probably.
Yeah, probably.
That's, I think, what would happen, right? So I think that he would do kind of some bargain hunting, and I think that he would bring in comparable players and do the kind of salary budgeting that he has done with Dessler and with Svatok in particular. I think that he would find people at a more club friendly range, let's say.
And applying that question to teams in the league, who you think's going to fall
Mm-hmm.
off the worst? Who's going to have a big jump back up?
Okay.
Who is headed for a
Ooh.
hurting 2025? Whether weird roster and they fired the coach, or weird roster and they kept the coach when other teams are getting rid of their coaches.
I think Vancouver without Sartini is going to drop back into kind of non-playoff status. I think they're gonna end up missing the playoffs again unless they replace him with someone remarkable. If they bring in a Curtin, then maybe, but if they just bring in like average coach or unknown coach or whatever it might be, I think that Vanny's approach was something that was pretty special for that group of players. And I think that they were beginning to really coalesce and then just had a bit of bad luck. I think that this was definitely a better Whitecaps team in 24 than in 23, but unless they are bringing in some fantastic new players and a fantastic new coach, I see them dropping off as well. And in terms of a team that's going to make a leap, I will say um, I'm going to be optimistic and I'm going to say it's going to be Austin. I'm going to say that
Yeah.
Austin is going to get good players. Estevez is going to work, and you're going to see Austin back in the playoffs next year. Again, that is contingent on some things, but I would see, yeah, I do see some hope. Oh, also, I think Houston might have some hard times as well, unless they can. Again, I know Herrera was not optimal this year, didn't go out in the best way possible, but I could see, for example, Karaskia moving to Europe. I could see them having real difficulties replacing those two players and what they'd envisioned there. And I could see a drop off for them just because, again, they do have a decent striker now. They do have some good pieces, but I think without Karaskia and what best level Herrera was providing them, I think they're a lot worse. And I don't know that they necessarily have what it's going to take from the front office to replace those players readily and easily.
I am going to pick San Jose to redefine the basement under Bruce Arena. How much
To be
worse
even worse than they were?
how much worse could they get?
Oh, God.
That's really what I feel like. That coaching hire,
Mhm.
show me players who are just champing at the bit to play for Bruce Arena. It's like they invited their own locker room nightmare. I don't know that Bruce Arena makes it through the whole season.
Mhm.
I think that's a real weird choice they made.
Yeah, he's been the MLS whisperer in the past, certainly with the Revs. Like, he got that team playing pretty well. He's brought in some good veterans. But yeah, I do feel, especially with wanting both kind of the coaching and the sporting director role and all that, I just, yeah, I think it's I think it's old school.
Dangerous.
I think I think him and Vermees are these last vestiges, these dinosaurs of this previous era. And I think actually under Arena, they are going to bounce back a little bit because I don't think that they're going to be as bereft defensively as they were this year because, like, how could you be? They set a record, but who knows? I think you got a case. I think
Yeah.
maybe they're even worse. Maybe they're even more dispirited. Again, going to be interesting to see them, who they're going to replace, what they're going to replace. I keep refreshing the Earthquake site to see if they are doing anything. They are still not naming any. They are not doing anything.
And I share your biggest leap pick of Austin for various reasons
Mhm,
that a lot of people are like, you're being too optimistic, man. I don't think I'm being too optimistic. But if I had to pick a team other than Austin, just to give us another data
mhm.
point, I'm going to go Atlanta.
Sure.
I think Atlanta as a club, as a fan base, drafting off
Yeah.
of the energy of they took out Messi. They took
Mhm.
Messi out of the playoffs. That is a special kind of energy. I'm sure they're sad to not be headed toward MLS Cup, but that is a special kind of gas in the tank. Let's see. Next up, we got Tony C. Contrary to the huffy nature of the masses, will Roto picking Nico early in the cycle be a huge boost?
Interesting. So rather than, you mean having waited for possibly better coaching candidates on,
Vanni Sartini for one. Would Vanni
God, I
Sartini
would
have?
love that.
But would Vanni Sartini have wanted to coach a team in Texas?
It
That's
is
another piece
Austin.
of it. That's a,
It is
this
Austin.
is
Like,
Austin. It's not Dallas. It's not Houston.
I show him around. Let him judge life in this blue dot here in this
Does
tomato
that
soup and see what that that does for him.
to extend on it? Do you think that vote of confidence really makes a substantive difference in terms of getting all the deck chairs in order, as it were?
So I think, again, like you've made this point, and I agree with this. I think in terms of what Roto wants to do, of all the coaches that are out there with MLS experience, I think Estevez best fits what he wants to do. I think that he sees that as the best possible partner. There is some unpredictability to what Vanni Sartini does. There are stylistic things that Curtin does that I think Roto might not necessarily be on board with 100%. I don't necessarily see that relationship going as well as it will with Estevez. Certainly, part of what happened with Curtin is he was butting heads with Urs Tanner reportedly through this season, and that's where things came to a head. Yeah, I do think of the coaches that are available and out there, and I know no way could I see Arena or Berhalter like coming here and asking for the kind of power that they were asking for. Like, yeah, that's just not possible. So I do think, yeah, that Estevez for what Burrell wants to do makes the most sense. It's just, is that going to emerge as the best choice overall for Austin? And if Estevez doesn't work out, then that certainly is going to reflect on Burrell's reputation and his cachet. And I think that the kind of trust and hope that a lot of people have in him might be impacted if you have another bad couple of seasons under a coach, while you have maybe comparably, you have Kurt and Sartini flourishing elsewhere.
Next up, Kyle asks, what are reasonable expectations to have for Austin's academy, given how that's worked elsewhere? How often do successful academies churn out first team caliber players, starters, etc.? When Roto says he wants that development pipeline to be a focus, what's the ceiling for it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think academies in general are just in this evolution. Obviously, you saw FC Dallas and the Union had built these really good academies and they were turning around these first team players. But I just think there's more competition, there's more attention on the league. I think that you have more of a global marketplace now in terms of finding these players and being able to have them come through other means than academy. You had colleges before, and those have been less and less impactful, although you do occasionally obviously have a Danny Pereira who comes from a college system who you find in the super draft. I think, again, it's Austin has a young academy. We're beginning to see some players. We've talked about Irvin Torres, we've talked about Micah Burton still as a possibility. Gavin Wolf has definitely some promise at his age. I think that it is possible to find these players, but I don't think that it's maybe as surefire a path as maybe it was even being touted a decade ago when you saw this real kind of move to expand academies and really put a lot more kind of attention on them and reshape the US Developmental Academy the way that they did. But I still think that it's important. And I still think that over time, yes, you can cultivate good players. Certainly, I think it's important in terms of your second teams in MLS Next Pro. And I think that connection there is important. But the big question is, yeah, can those second team players make the leap into MLS? Or is this something that kind of ultimately stocks USL and then you have some players from that emerge and over time and development can come in and crack MLS? You must have some thoughts on this because you think
Yeah.
about the second team in the academy a lot.
One of the things when Roto just came in, he said that he wishes the academies went U lower than they do.
Mhm.
Why isn't there a U6? Why doesn't
Yeah,
the
the Union
academy
had a
system
U6 program. Yeah.
why doesn't the academy system here match what Europe has and what a few
Mhm.
places in MLS have? I think that it's MLS. Oh gosh, MLS is a little over 25 years old. That's still young compared to other leagues and other systems across the world.
Sure. Yep.
And we're looking at generational levels of time that need to pass
Mhm.
to be able to look at one-to-one parity with, for example, any number of European academies. Um,
Right.
I think that we'll probably see a lot more growth on the academy to next pro to MLS pipeline over the next 5 years. There's a sense that things are being taken so much more seriously, where
Mhm. Yeah.
US based families are not necessarily trying to see if they can fight their way into Barca's academy or Manchester City's or Arsenal or something like that. And do they have an
Right.
auntie in Birmingham? And by Birmingham, I don't mean Alabama. Yeah, I think that this next generation coming up, Irvin Torres is a great shout for this. Is let's see what Irving Torres does.
Mhm.
That right there to me is a great example of a player with a lot of potential.
Mhm.
And let's see how that plays out. And does he stay focused? Does he stay on the ball? Does he keep minding his P's and Q's the way that he has been as a player on an ex pro team?
And do you have like maybe two or three of those level of players in the next class, right? So that's the other thing too, right? Yeah, if you do find like these occasional gems and they help fill out your roster, that's great. But yeah, is it going to be something where you can consistently count on those players, or are you going to have to truly go into the global market to round out your team? And is that going to be primarily what happens? It's yeah, again, we're at a real interesting point of evolution. But yeah, I do think that the existence of MLS Next Pro and having that bridge between academies and first teams and allowing a lot of those players to have meaningful minutes in a higher level competition that they'll get in academy, I think is certainly important. But it's just a matter of is the level of play in MLS Next Pro going to get to, say, a USL level?
Yeah, when people pejoratively say next pro is Academy Plus, I
Mhm.
say the exact same words with a different tone of voice where I'm like, it's Academy Plus. It's
Yeah.
sometimes you're watching too old to be in the Academy players playing Academy level ball with no VAR
Mhm.
and whatever ref was not working their shift at Starbucks that night sometimes. But other times you get to see a next pro squad take on an MLS Cup caliber goalie in Maxime Crepeau. Sometimes you see them without veteran players like that playing down, as it were. You see some extraordinary stuff from players, some of whom will be that next generation coming up. Some of them will filter in
Mhm.
to USL because maybe they're getting a bit old for being the young hotshot, the Diego Fagundes, Kevin
Yeah.
Sullivan, that kind of thing. But it's fascinating. It's dollar for dollar one of the best tickets you can buy in US soccer. So up next, our colleague Michelle Sanchez asks, will MLS return to their OG programming? All matches on Saturdays aren't working for me. Michelle,
Me
boy,
either.
me either. Yeah. I mean, I've heard, that there have been rumors floating around since even earlier this season that they were looking at messing with the schedule. Do you feel like they realize that unified kickoff times outside of things like decision day maybe don't actually work? What is your vibe? What are you hearing, if anything, through the grapevine?
I have not heard anything. I would be really shocked if the numbers have been good for Apple TV just based on a lot of your fan base is at their own home games, right? You are half your audience is in a stadium that might be interested in some of the other games that are being counter programmed directly with those games. So that is a concern. And I think that's something that they probably want to amend. Again, should they do a Friday night game? Should they do some staggered Saturday afternoon games? Should they do more Sunday games? I think so. I think they should try to spread it a little bit more around the weekends so you can have opportunities. Some Friday nights, yes, I'm committed. I'm doing stuff. I'm having a social life, being able to go on a date with my wife, things like that. But some nights are you're staying home, you're getting ready to do something in the morning. Kids turning in early. And yeah, it's sometimes something where,
Sometimes it's
yes,
a
I would.
sure I'll watch this West Coast game that isn't a team that I necessarily follow, that isn't my home team, but
Right.
sure, who cares? Yeah, I'll watch San
It
Diego
is
versus whoever.
Colorado. Yeah. It is
Yeah.
it is after dark. So maybe something wacky will happen. And oftentimes when there's after dark games, it does. And it's a lot of fun and it's entertaining. But again, like we are people that watch a lot of teams, we watch a lot of games. But I do think also if you are trying to attract more casual fans, things like that, giving them kind of more windows, more opportunities to do that is great. Because again, you are part of it is you are also dealing with college football in the latter half. And yes, you may have a lot of teams playing it Saturday at 7:30, but if you're like a Bama fan or you're an Ohio State fan, then you might be also watching those teams on prime time and might be interested in soccer, but you are with your college football team ride or die first. And you're going to miss out on that audience versus if it's a Friday night and there's crappy college football games versus, oh, here's this MLS game that's quirky and interesting. And oh, yeah, it's playing on Friday night. You might tune into that. You might really, I think, get into that. So yeah, I do think that, yeah, what's happening now is maybe there are some kind of advantages scheduling wise and things like that to do it the way that they're doing it. But I think that they're depriving themselves of audience by having so many games all at once.
I mean, the most dedicated fans, looking at folks inside the Austin fan base as an example, when the game times were staggered all over the place, it would be cool. I'm going to go to the stadium and then I'm going to, go home and wash the beer shower off of me and maybe watch another couple games, depending on when kickoff is. There's so many different facets to this. One of them is at a certain point, they made season pass free to anybody who was an active Apple TV Plus subscriber. So
Mhm.
they just dropped the paywall and then made it $9.99 for anybody who didn't pay for TV Plus. And then they got to watch the entirety of the MLS playoffs, everything season pass,
Mhm.
like the suckers who paid for it or the season ticket holders who got it included, in their tickets. The value in trying to get people habitually used to watching soccer in addition to other stuff is
Mhm.
giving them multiple time slots to be watching various things. Like I've been watching Champions League stuff in the midweek as it's been played
Mhm.
in midday. And if anything, the weirdest thing, we were talking about this, USL putting their cup final first thing in the morning on a Saturday.
Mhm.
Hey, it didn't compete with NWSL. It didn't compete
Yeah.
with any of the Premier League stuff. It didn't compete with anything else. It was actually at a time when people who actively follow USL could catch that game. Some of that kind
Right.
of dynamic scheduling would be helpful because I'll see people complain about, oh, didn't they know that UT has a home game? The MLS schedule got set before the fall college football schedule got set. MLS had no way to know that they were going to be putting an Austin FC home game against a
Mhm.
UT game. Could they have known that time wise, maybe the two things were going to line up? Like time of day is something that they can work against. Go
The
ahead.
other thing too, though, is that college football, like sometimes they will change game times to maximize audience. So if you had a team
Yeah.
that like you weren't expecting to be like as good matching up against Texas, and that was a 2:30 game, maybe you put that on at 7 instead because all of a sudden you have Texas and another ranked team, whereas you thought they might not necessarily be a ranked team, and that's going to be your best audience. Yeah. So again, that's another force too that MLS can't really contend with, right? Unless MLS was more flexible and maybe
Mhm.
move some of their times more around and things like that. But again, I'm going to be really interested to see if there are any kind of substantive changes with both this and the playoffs for next year based on what is largely perceived to not be working. Again, I don't know if they have numbers that are telling them that it is working in ways that they want it to, but my perception is that, yeah, that there are some issues. And Michelle's question reflects that I am not
Mhm.
alone in that.
Speaking of forces, I'll mention one other force, a force of nature, before we
Okay.
move on to the next question. Climate change, man. The thing that has me hoping that MLS does actually engage that switch to the European schedule, as it were, or the rest of the world
Right.
soccer schedule, is that it gets the absolute worst heat months of the year for the United States and Canada
Right.
and Mexico out of the way,
Hmm.
because some of these summer conditions that these players are being expected to play in is akin
Hmm.
to, the reason they had to move the Qatar World Cup into the relatively cool season for that part of the world.
Yeah.
That is something that, as much as they may wish for it to be different, sorry, but nature isn't taking notes.
I just want to say that in places like Portland, Seattle, Minnesota, summer is an optimal time to go to a stadium to watch a soccer game outdoors. Whereas obviously, infamously, Minnesota in February was a
Yeah.
really
Oh,
terrible
well,
place for that
this
US
season,
game. Yeah.
the RSL
Yeah. Yeah.
LAFC snowball game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna get stuff like that. But that Minnesota game was like, it was actually physically dangerous to play that game. But yeah, but for most of, I would say for most of the MLS markets, it is going to be more unbearable in the summer than, again, the few markets where it's going to be more tolerable. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's going to continue. And again, yeah, and that's going to be a thing again with World Cups being in the summer. Yeah, like you mentioned with Qatar, you saw that move to just the unusual soccer on Thanksgiving deal,
Yeah.
soccer leading up to Christmas. It was weird, but yeah, we might see more of that in the future. Just especially if they're going to put in Saudi Arabia, you're not going to have games in Saudi Arabia in July. You're just not,
No. Scott
especially in a
Specht,
decade, right? Yeah. Okay.
Scott Specht asks in a question that I know he knows a bit of the answer to. How does the experience of watching a match from the press box differ from watching in the stands?
It's a lot quieter.
Yeah.
We have windows that block out a lot of the sound. At times, they have tried to pipe in some of the stadium noise. That has not work terribly well. I wish the windows would open. They do not. It can be good in ways because you're a little bit more insulated. And again, especially for me when I'm writing, it is easier to focus that way. But you are definitely missing something in terms of the energy and the noise and all that. Although, yes, it could be distracting, but not really. I don't think that it would be unbearable, especially at the part of the stadium where we're at to deal with that. We do hear there's a certain fan that sits right under us in the press box who will periodically go, "You suck, ref." And so we'll hear
Yeah.
that. Typically, we know that kind of the game is really underway when we hear the first of those from that
Yep.
guy, and then he'll just periodically punctuate action in that way. We will know that a call is egregious and the audience feels that way based on this one representative. But yeah, it's a high up vantage point. It's great for North End goals. It is not as good for South End goals.
It's, hey, did you see through the glare? Who was that assist? What?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a bit of like backtracking. I'll watch like on my phone, I'll watch Apple TV playback for goals, just get better sense of the buildup, like while the teams are running back and all that and things like that. There is also that delay as well. But I would say overall, I really appreciate having that vantage point. I really appreciate being able to watch the games and interpret it in that way. But again, I still like to venture out into the stadium to watch a game a couple times a
Yeah.
year at least. And then also there is the big kind of fourth floor party porch, which is right next door to the press box. Sometimes we will wander out there to catch the first parts of games, just to get a sense of like the energy and the feel and the vibes and all that. But yeah, but it's sometimes security is not happy about us being out there and doing that. So that's another
Yeah.
that's another consideration. So you're relatively new to the press box
Yeah.
compared to me, who I've been there pretty much the duration. So what are your views about it? How is it different for you?
It's one of the sound baffling is a big part of it. You do miss a certain amount of stuff, but the thing about the press box is you can still those moments of rarefied air when the
Hmm.
crowd is summoning up the energy for a last ditch corner kick or a last final
Yep.
drive or something like
Great.
that all
Yep.
still comes through perfectly.
Yep.
And, for the purpose of doing the work that we're doing, that the windows don't open, it would be nice for them to be able to open.
Hmm.
But I don't feel like I am missing the ability to, if I stay in there the entire time for a whole game, I don't feel like I'm missing being able to report on the experience itself. I
Yeah.
do, however, on occasion, either go out to that fourth floor balcony. Sometimes I'll take the elevator all the way down to the concourse level and walk
Hmm.
around and just, take in where things are at, where the vibes
Hmm.
are. If it looks like, it's going to be a crazy last few minutes, sometimes I will come out from the ivory tower, as it were, and just soak in the vibes of and the energy of the crowd. There's nothing like being out in the stadium seats or in the south end standing. It is definitely not the same experience.
Right.
It is a different way to experience a game. Your vantage point, both visually and acoustically and all that, is that itself is different, but it allows for a bit more of an opportunity to get the vibe of, what's going on with the away fans up in their penalty corner where they live
Hmm.
on, I guess we'll call it the Claudio Reyna Memorial porch up in the top stands, see how the south end is going.
When
There,
security's giving North End Pirates a hard time, we
yeah,
can see that all
exactly.
play out pretty well from where we're sitting.
Huh? Yeah, there is a better opportunity to take in different things that are happening all over that stadium all at
Yeah.
once, where for sheer entertainment value, sure, there's nothing like actually being out in the crowd. But in terms of taking in a whole game, there are plenty of things that you see from our vantage point that you don't get on the broadcast, that you don't get from the
Hmm.
stands. Yeah, if the implicit question baked into that too is which is better, I really can't say which is better. They're just very different in
Yeah.
very specific ways.
I will
Where
say
I'm
though, in
oh
Houston, like there is a outside and an inside part of the press box. So you can either be behind glass with the air conditioning, closer to the food, or you can be a little bit farther forward. You're out, you're exposed, you're seeing what the crowd's doing. You're able to listen to the band go through their same like 7 or 8 songs for 90 full minutes. But I would say, again, in that situation, it is hot as outside a lot of times in Houston, but I will opt to go outside to be closer to the action. I remember I went to Yankee Stadium one time and their press box is really conveniently placed for baseball, where you're behind home plate, but you are so far away from the field for NYCFC games. And I was like, I was watching it there doing stuff for my book. I wasn't like reporting or anything like that. I didn't need to be with my computer. I was there for like about 5 minutes, and so I'm gonna go over the fans where left field is, and I want to actually take in this game and experience it. And I'm not going to be able to experience it when I'm like 70 yards away from the closest part of the field.
Yeah, I had a similar experience going out to Choctaw, aka formerly known as the ballpark in
Yeah,
Arlington,
yeah,
to
right.
watch North Texas games, and their press box, based on how they set themselves up in that stadium for soccer, is actually a pretty solid vantage point to
Okay.
the point that they have, the visiting team's technical staff, watching from the same press box that I'm in. At the same time, it just really sells how incredibly vacuously empty that place is
Yeah,
for
I'm sure.
third division second team games.
It is
Um,
not a soccer specific stadium, is it?
don't get me started. Filler will be here all day. Trevor wants to know which
Uh-huh.
European star's reaction to Timber Joey firing up the chainsaw would be the funniest.
Bernadeschi.
Bernadette. Oh, Bernadeschi. That's
I don't
good.
know. Yeah, because I don't think Portland's played Toronto while he's been there, but that would be amazing. I don't know. I guess was that European star in MLS currently or just
You know
European
what?
star period?
Look, you chose to interpret it as you chose to. I'm going to choose to interpret it my way so that I can pick Messi. I think, I think, I think Messi would be shocked and concerned, and oh no,
Hmm.
the fans have gone crazy, and then somebody will be like, no, this is totally normal. He's not going to kill anyone. Promise, it'll be fine. And then just
Holland would be
watch.
fun for this too, actually.
Holland would probably think it was hilarious and actually
Yeah.
think maybe I'm going to see someone die today. And last one from Tim,
Oh man.
MLS Cup, who's your pick and why? So we talked a little bit earlier about,
Yeah.
what we want the matchup to be. Who's hoisting the trophy this year?
Galaxy. They're averaging 5 goals a game. They've let in less than a goal a game from open play over the course of the playoffs. Unless they have some kind of epic meltdown in either of these last 2 games, they're the team. They're clearly, from their first beatdown of the Rapids, they showed themselves to be the team while all these other top teams were struggling. They've hit every gear they need to at this point. They didn't quite finish as strong as they could have because they didn't get the 1 seed in the West, but it ultimately did not matter for them. They've looked fantastic in the playoffs, and they're a lot of fun. And for them to have been as bad as they were last year and then to all of a sudden turn that around and potentially win MLS Cup just indicates that if you buy $20 million of DP winger, you too can be good. Rodolfo Burrell. Just saying.
For my money, if I were trolling, I would say the New York, New Jersey Red Bulls, because nobody in the MLS front office wants that. They wouldn't say that publicly, but nobody in the MLS
it's their
front office
hometown
wants
team. I don't know.
that. Hometown. They're in New Jersey. They're named New York, but we both know the Metro Stars play in New Jersey.
To be specific, yes. Which, I'm actually, this is a little thing. You may have come to this from the print mailbag, but I got asked about all the stadiums I've been in.
Yep.
And the first time that I was in Red Bull Arena was for the Arsenal Red Bulls match, which was the Thierry Henry game, where I got to meet Arsene Wenger and I got to hang out with Flamini and Aaron Ramsey and all these people and gaze upon the FA Cup and all this great stuff. But it was also like my first time in an Uber. This is like when Uber was like first starting out. And I could not get an Uber out of Harrison after the match, like an hour after the match. That's how young Uber was, but that's also how isolated Harrison is.
Yeah, it's almost as if I looked over all those answers to everything and I had something to cue you with. So if I'm betting, it's gonna be Galaxy or Orlando, I think. And Galaxy, like you said, they're the ones with the story this year. I would hope that they really have to work for it. I don't want to see them skate to it. I don't want them to just embarrass somebody and get their way there. I want them to earn it in these last 2 games, not on the credit of the season that they've had, big turnaround from their own bits of turnover and everything. But that's the version of Galaxy winning the cup that feels okay with me.
I can also see the Soundersing.
Entirely possible. And that's something that, there being chatter about rifts within the fan base and definitely between the fan base and their front office. It would be good for that fan base to have something to rally around that could, maybe mend some fences over there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. So are those all the questions?
That's it. That's all.
Wow.
We finished at MLS Cup.
Long time.
Very long, Phil, but
we finished about the time that MLS Cup is starting.
Yeah. Wow. Is it December already?
Yeah. Why don't we actually go a little bit longer? So, Emmy.
Hi.
Hi. So you are expressing more interest in soccer over the last few days.
Yep.
Interested in a soccer writing career. What have we been talking about? What kind of things have you been learning?
I've been learning a lot about the formation since my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's been teaching me.
So what are some formations?
1, 4.
Yeah.
2, 3.
4-2-3-1.
Oh yeah.
And a 4-3-3. You came up with a 1-1-1-1-1-1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. We learned about a Christmas tree, right?
Yep.
Yeah, a 4-3-2-1.
Yep.
So that was fun. So you're learning about all the positions. What other kinds of things? You were making some observations about the coaches.
Yeah. A lot of stuff that this guy's been teaching me. So we watched the game that was playing like a while ago.
Yeah, LFC Seattle game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't see all of it because I needed to go to bed since I'm 7. And 7-year-olds need to sleep.
Uh-huh.
And it was like 11.
But then you got to see the highlights.
Yeah. And this guy told me about it.
Yeah, it was a really good game.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that own goal?
It was impressive.
Yeah. in the wrong way, right?
Yeah.
And then the actual goal that won the game was pretty good, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And that guy's really fast. So
Yeah.
yeah, first time I saw him, I didn't know who he was. He was playing for the US team. I was like, who is that really fast guy on the field? And it turned out to be Jordan Morris,
And
who's shaped like a rectangle. But he's a really good player. And then any other thoughts on Nico Estevez? You got to meet him a few weeks ago, right?
yeah.
How are you feeling about the prospects of him as a coach?
I feel pretty good about him.
Yeah.
He's been like a coach one more.
Yeah, he was a coach at Dallas, and then he's been a coach in Spain. How'd you feel about Josh Wolf?
Silence. That's
Silence.
how I
Silence. You're in a safe space. You can express opinions.
It was silence for me. I just couldn't say anything really. I didn't have any opinion really.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah. It's not as fun as, and you got to go to a game, right? Okay.
Only for a little bit.
Yeah. And then you actually got to go on the field, right?
Yeah, since I'm your daughter.
Yeah. And you got to be a mascot. So do you remember who they were playing?
Austin FC.
Yeah, Austin FC, but who are they playing? What's a
Okay.
city that your aunt lived in? And their nickname is the Fire?
I don't know.
Chicago Fire, remember?
Oh yeah, Chicago.
And then you got to hold hands with who?
Wait, I think his name is Shaqiri.
Yeah, Shaqiri. Zerdan Shaqiri.
Wow.
And what did we learn his nickname was when we were doing some research on him?
My dad was like searching since I was doing some thingamajig.
Yeah.
And his nickname, this was really funny to my dad, not so much for me. It was the Magic Dwarf.
The Magic Dwarf.
Wow.
Also the Alpine Messi.
You learn something every time you do one of these.
But you didn't find that as funny.
Yes.
Okay. So you want to be a soccer writer now, but you were also a big Taylor Swift expert?
Yeah.
Do you want to share some thoughts about Taylor Swift?
Soccer
That's
fan.
okay. We cross over into pop culture. What's your favorite Taylor Swift album?
I'm not sure. I have too many.
You have too
Well,
many?
Back to soccer questions.
Okay, sure.
So I actually have a question.
Okay, good.
So about the Austin FC couldn't play since they needed more people on the team since people who weren't doing good had to leave.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. I'm a 7-year-old. I've been playing soccer for 4 years. I'm talented.
Uh-huh.
And yes.
You're very fast.
Yes.
What position do you play usually?
I'm not sure.
Midfield, right?
Yeah.
Usually? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can do good on defense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the name of your team last time you played?
This was his idea.
Yeah, that was my idea. I was the coach. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a coach for a team. Ah,
Do you remember?
yeah.
Lay it on us.
Our team last year was called the 4-Day Vipers.
The Verde Vipers.
Wow.
You came up with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
How did that team do?
Pretty good.
I don't know. There were a lot of losses, right? So
Yep.
we had a lot of fun though, right?
Yep.
A lot of running around. Yep. It was good times. So played with NASA, which is the very kid-friendly youth league that's here. That friend of the show, Lee Nichols, was once executive director a few years ago. Yeah. Any other thoughts that you want to give us about? So you are going to be the 7-year-old hope for the soccer team going forward in 2025 and make Nico Estevez really proud. And you don't want to share Taylor Swift stuff yet, but when you are leading Austin FC to victory, you will play a lot of Taylor Swift in the locker room. Is there a good Taylor Swift hype song for the soccer team pregame? Would Look What You Made Me Do be a good hype song?
No.
Ready for it? Ready for It's good, right?
Oh yeah,
No.
probably.
Yeah.
Even Shake It Off?
I'm not sure which one would
Yeah.
be good.
Okay. I think Ready for It's a good hype jam.
Yeah, probably.
What's Dad's favorite Taylor Swift album?
Midnight.
Midnights. Yeah. Are you sick of listening to Midnights?
Yes, now that you've played it every 5 million minutes of our life,
Yeah.
there's still good songs that I'm not tired of.
But Dad's ruining it a little bit.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
All right.
Ruining it by playing vigilante.
I do that. Yeah. Vigilante bleep word. You can say vigilante swear word, right? Like you do on the show.
Yeah.
Sit.
Vigilante swear word.
Yeah.
I am the expert with saying that
That was good.
live.
Yeah. That, by the way, we use our voice to bleep out bad words like we did earlier. So but now you got like a live rendition of that. Anything else you want to share with the people, Emmy?
Yes.
You were plugging your YouTube channel last time. I don't think you've been doing much with that lately. Anything else you want to say?
So yes, I have a question
Okay. Another question?
to ask my dad
Okay.
and everyone else listening.
Okay.
You can answer in the philo question thingamajig thing.
Yeah. 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 We have
So-
comment section. You can pop it in there.
So there was a team, and they only had good players on it, and then they were playing against a team that only had bad players on it.
Uh-huh.
And the team that had only bad players on it won.
Yeah.
Would that be confusing?
It would be confusing. So you could make the case maybe that LAFC is a team with good players and
Austin
that
FC.
Austin FC has been a team with bad players, but they won some games where turn things around. And again, what were perceived to be bad players were suddenly perceived to be good players, and a lot of good things happened. And then they went to a Western Conference Finals, and LAFC won by a lot. It was really sad, and our players look like bad players again. So that is something that happens. But yeah, typically when you have good players on a team, that team tends to do really well, which is why it's important to sign good players and why it's important to have your designated players and your U22s and your TAM players be really good and contribute.
So
One last question. We got to wrap up. What are you looking forward to most the next time that you go to Q2 Stadium to watch an Austin FC game?
I don't want it to be too loud.
Okay.
But I want Austin FC to win if
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
the only team that I really like playing.
Except for the Whitecap Cougars.
Whitecaps.
Yeah.
Actually. That's what
Yeah,
we
I
call
know
them.
that.
That's what we call them
Yes,
actually.
I know that. Yes.
And I would be excited to be with Mom and you,
Mhm.
Mr.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Guy.
And a foam finger, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any food you'd want?
Pizza
Okay.
or McDonald's.
Okay. They don't have
And
McDonald's, but they do have
everything
pizza.
else for me.
They have double dives. They have pizza rolls too. You get one of those if you wanted. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Anything else you want to add?
Phil, I don't think that we got anything San Jose wise. The one good thing that came out of this, much longer than I think either of us expected recording, is that rumor has it, according to The Athletic, that Boss Nation in NWSL is looking at maybe changing the name of their club.
Oh yeah. I saw that. Yeah.
So there is some good news.
Yeah. That's a terrible name.
It's a
Boss Nation
terrible
FC.
name.
Yeah. Does that sound like a good name for a team? Like
Boss
Boston, they
Nation.
want to name their women's team Boss Nation FC.
That is like the worst name I've ever heard.
Yeah, I agree.
That sounds like it came out of a broken typewriter.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, like it came out of a broken typewriter. Exactly. Yeah. And bad focus groups. Yeah, absolutely.
For no particular reason, would you mind saying the phrase, "That's like the worst thing I've ever heard"?
That is like the worst thing I've ever heard in the history of the 7 years that I've been on this planet.
Beautiful. We have our new outro.
We have an outro
Phil.
cue.
We have an outro cue, Phil. Let's cut it there.
That's beautiful.
not
All
gonna
right.
do-
Thank you for sticking with us. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for all the mailbag questions. We will be back at some time before MLS Cup to talk about MLS Cup and whatever other kinds of news and, of course, Austin FC emergencies come down the pike. Happy Thanksgiving, and I hope that this has brought you, I guess, 2 hours of joy is what I'm guessing. I'm not running out of timer on this,
What a
but
bonus.
wow, we've gone a long time. All right. Take care.
Bye.